Today, I'm so excited to be here with Sarah Basha. Sarah is a mentor, an astrologist, and a doula for the new age. So welcome, Sarah. I'm so, as I just said, I'm so happy you're here because we have so much to talk about. This podcast is very much about humanity's shift into the new paradigm, and that is so much about what your work is about. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited as well.
So my big question was like, where do we dive in? So I'd like to actually just start hearing about how you got into the work that you do and basically how you see astrology and the work that you're doing and why you're doing it.
When people ask me how I ended up working with the stars and people's souls, I always go back to my 6-year-old self because I have a book that my mom gifted me then, which is called In the Beginning. And in this book, in the first page, she wrote, "You have big questions. I don't have all the answers." And this book was a collection of creation stories from around the world, indigenous people as well. And I do recall being pretty anxious at the fact that people were talking about the solar system, God, all these things. And it didn't answer my question of why. Like, why are we here? So that's always been kind of the thing that has led my life, seeking that question for myself, like, why am I here? And astrology became the tool to kind of confirm to me why. I worked in leadership training for my first career and loved it for an organization called the Center for Creative Leadership. In my 20s, I was like a geek and I was taking notes and I learned so much about myself. It was a bit woo-woo already then, but it was more, kind of traditional leadership training with personality tests and things like that. But at the time, I already started diving into archetypes. One of my clients actually said, like, you really need to, he became a mentor, and he's like, you really need to look at archetypes. I think it's something that would be powerful for you. And so the world of Jung just opened up for me. And then I would eventually become a freelancer and use archetypes as a way to help organizations define their vision, their brand story, all that good stuff. And then it really, like, I see how it progressed into no longer asking, people and organizations if they're aligned with the vision, but now are they aligned with their soul? And astrology speaks of our evolution here on Earth, why we came here, and how we are going to journey. What is our hero's journey? So today I love to teach people how to use their map. So I read, of course, for people, that's a point of entry. But my most precious work is teaching people to tune into their body, their somatic and intuitive bodies, to actually know that they are aligned with their chart, and using some wisdom on the chart so that they can actually see, get confirmation that they're in the right place, doing the right thing in the right unique way. And then also creating spaces where we can activate essentially the new paradigm collectively, because for me, it is about being and being together.
Beautiful. Oh, I love that story and all of the way it weaves from leadership training. And I think that's why you asked my Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
I was like, that's an interesting question. Makes perfect sense now. And then how that weaved into archetypes. My work with hypnotherapy and the subconscious is really informed by Jung. And what you said about having it give us a map to what our soul is meant to be doing here, I find that is such an interesting point of a compass for this, right? Because, astrology, when I was growing up, it would be in the, the magazines of oh, what's your horoscope? But the way that I started looking at it now and the way that I'm using it more and more is to describe or to map what I'm supposed to be doing here and answering that big question of what are we and what am I doing here? So how do you use your chart, or how does one use their chart to find these answers?
Yeah. So yesterday, I was in conversation with someone. They said that I had inspired them to understand that it really is a tool. I embody my chart. I practice relating to myself and to the world through it. So every day on my Instagram and for myself, I journal. I see, okay, where's the sun? Where's the moon? What's the big story? And the way I describe the planets is, imagine a dinner party and everyone's sitting at the table and they have different kinds of voices. And so there's a different conversation at the table depending on who's kind of speaking. And so it's the same thing every day. There's a conversation going. And so then I always ask myself, okay, so that's the collective story. What does that mean for me? If the sun is here, what does that mean for me? Which house, which part of my life am I kind of being illuminated? And I focus my energy on that part so that I'm aligning with the cosmos. And I teach people to do the same thing. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Because it's that question of like, where am I supposed to be going? That is, I think, occurring for a lot of people, you know, and that's that shift we're talking about into the new paradigm. And how is astrology and, you know, the stars, how is it a tool of faith and trust? Because I think a lot of people are scared and like really freaked out and weirded out right now.
Yes. I think the thing that it's given me is actually faith and trust. Is that when I look at it, I'm so deeply moved. I'm in awe. And we see, like, it's happened to me to sit with someone and look at their chart and see how even I am connected to them. Like the invisible threads that connect us all, the collective story is always in every single person's chart. So we kind of like see the collective story unfolding at the same time as the personal one. And that has always given me a sense of faith and also a belief, and it may, you know, not be a constructed one, but a belief that the universe really is a benevolent thing. It wants us to evolve for our highest good, and that when we align, we can see that. Like anything, you know, so it's not a fixed thing, because I know a lot of people are afraid of astrology and afraid of this time because they're afraid of change. They're afraid of transformation, of what they don't control. But if we can tune in to our inner light, we're in a Hermit year, which is all about like going inwards and cultivating that inner light. When we do that, we know that we're never alone. We know that everything that is challenging is an opportunity for growth and learning. And I think that the truth is always very present with us, even the difficult ones. And so that's where we find, or at least where I find, trust and faith.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially right now when, you know, many of us can feel that there's connection, but sometimes it's hard to know, you know, is somebody out there? So like, is there a place that this is going or that I'm going? So having that map of, okay, this is my chart, right? How much is written in the stars, so to speak? I know that there's free will, right? We know that there's free will, but how much is like, okay, these things are meant to happen to you? And how much of the rest, like, I guess the question I'm asking is, can you evolve beyond the reliance on your chart?
Yes, totally. So it is a tool of evolution, right, of alignment. And I always say to people in palmistry, which was my first tool, we say that one hand is what life gives you and the other is what you do with it. And you'll see that the lines will change. So that in the same way, the chart is a map, but it doesn't prescribe what you're going to do with it. You have the choice of that. What we can see is like, where is the energy kind of concentrating or moving towards? And you either move with it, or which is alignment, or you resist it and get in your head or decide that you want to go with the plan that you had, right? So I think that is also like really important to see that it's a relationship. It really is like everything in the chart reflects parts of ourselves, but also parts of the outside world. Because in a sense, like, you know, if we think spiritually, everything outside of us is also us, or, you know, so it's the same thing. You can decide to relate to that part of yourself or project it out onto other people, or own it and see them as a mirror and a growth, you know, a soul evolutionary opportunity. And so I think that, though, is also where people have kind of resistance, is that we have been conditioned to feel that we are not in such power. And so therefore we don't have so much choice. And we kind of let almost things happen to us rather than see them as, even in our, like sometimes in our passive state, a choice. Right?
Gosh, yeah.
It's so much easier to be like, oh, you know, my parents did this or my partner this, than saying, what is it about them that I chose or that I choose to see as a evolution of my deepest, most beautiful self, authentic self, right?
Yes, and it's that balance of, you are, you know, the creator of your universe, and there's some surrender into. So it's like, it's a beautiful, balance. Really difficult, I think, balance, because it's very empowering to know that you have choice, but it's also feels good to surrender into, okay, there's a bigger picture here. And that's what I started really loving about astrology, because as you said, some people really fear the change and the transition. But if you zoom out and you see the big picture, which, not just our own chart, but like the evolutionary astrology of the collective
Yes.
allows you to do. So it can give you a different perspective on things that feel very, very messy.
Mm-hmm.
I heard an astrologist once describe if you'd walked in to see a woman having a baby, like you would think that something horrible was going on. Like you would think it was just like, murder. But then you would, if you had spanned out to see the big picture and what's on the other side of it. So I thought that was a great analogy for some of the more turbulent times that we've been in more recently. So you said something, because I want to talk a little bit about like the evolution, not just of ourselves, but of
the collective
and the planet. You said that this is a hermit year.
Yes.
Can you so we're in 2025.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes. So I just want to bounce on something that you just kind of said that's important, is that it also is about our relationship to time. So in the Western, patriarchal kind of relationship to time, it is a very linear thing, right? We're progressing over time. But astrology, the map is always a circle, and indigenous cultures know, and like Jung speaks of this hero's journey, it is a cycle, and it is an ever-ending or continuing cycle. So the change is part of our of life. And so it's also kind of the shift for me is in understanding that what rises, like the moon, will also go dark and reappear. And so if we zoom out, I would have loved to be a historian. I have a sister who's a historian. I think history is really useful for astrology.
Yes.
We now live in a time where I can Google, dates and check what was happening at those dates. But, history is another tool of understanding time in a different way, where you can zoom out and have a sense that some of these things are really cyclical, but we're never going back in time. We're always moving forward.
Like a clock, right?
Yeah. So it's always going to be changed. Like when people say, talking about the Hermit year, like Pluto left Capricorn, and that's Pluto is the planet of transformation and change and power. And so when Pluto left Capricorn and now moved into Aquarius, which happened at the beginning of this year, which is why this year is so important. When that happened, it essentially marked the end, because Pluto is about ending, the end of Capricorn era. Capricorn era is the patriarchal era of things that we build over time, the mountain, the emperor, So the empires, quite literally or symbolically, have ended.
Yes.
And it's not going to be visible quite yet, but we all kind of feel it. We're even hearing that kind of discourse. And then with Pluto moving into Aquarius, we are at the beginning of understanding that we're moving into a new era, new paradigm. And Pluto will bring up the shadow. So we start with kind of being confronted with the shadow, which is the fear of the future, because Aquarius is the future time, the multiple paradigms. It is the world and realms that we have not seen ever. So even, in our human existence, it is by the fact that it is the realms alien time, infinite space, it's all of these things, science, all those spaces where we expand really our capacity, because it's air of thinking. So our minds will be really important. But it can bring up, again, that fear, because and that's why people are afraid of the robots and all that stuff, because that is part of that new era, the new paradigm. And for the Hermit year, I think it's so beautiful, because in this year of every single planet, it's hard to conceive for someone that may not understand, but every single planet of our solar system is shifting. That means that every single person on this planet and living thing is shifting. And also the collective planet. So every collective planet is also shifting, which means that we are having collective shift and individual shift. And when we speak of the paradigm shift, this is it. It literally is in astrological terms. This is the year of the shift. That doesn't mean that it's the year of the becoming, or the manifesting of what that shift brings, but it is the year of the shift. And so in tarot, we use numbers or numerology, and so that's how we have the Hermit card as our guiding card. And it is an invitation in the shift to go inwards. And so when we say Hermit, people, it's again I'm afraid of change. Does Hermit mean I have to be alone? Well, how do you know which way to go? I love the card. It shows a man in a cloak with a lantern, and there's a strong light, and it's a star that he's carrying, and he's moving with this star. for me, the star is also like the North Star, our North Star. And Jung speaks of that Joseph Campbell speaks of the North Star. So it's like, how do you move with your North Star? And it's not a fast pace because the Hermit knows that he's on his path and the path is illuminated as we're on it. And so this is why I think also this year we need to cultivate that sense of it's okay to be in the forest, the dark forest, because I've got my North Star. And what does that feel like? What does it, what does it evoke for me? And the only truth is our own. No one else can, I can give keys to people, but then they have to choose, right? Which way they walk, which way they talk, what they do, if they align with it or not, if it resonates with them. They can deny it and be like, no, actually, I really want this, and we've all done that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you just said is very illuminating to me and very comforting, because this year I've had, things I thought were going to go one way, they went another way. And it's really, I was telling you before you came, like, I'm just feeling really hermity. I didn't even know it was the year of the Hermit. But yeah, I've just felt like, I didn't really feel like I've been compelled to really go in. And, I'm kind of feeling, what I'm feeling when, as I talk to clients, through my work and friends, I noticed that this theme is not unique to me. I think my signature of it is unique, but it's been really internal, right? It's been almost like this opportunity. I use that word now. I probably wouldn't have used it a month ago. It's been an opportunity to just sort of say, okay, now it's time to really descend and go in before you come back up. So that Hermit with the flashlight and the northern light, I find that a very comforting image right now, because it's felt slow and So I think a lot of other people listening would find that very comforting as well.
I hope so. I think, again, this idea of the time, right? We've been in a fast-paced time, and the shift in Aquarius is that it's no longer the same notion of time. Like literally time will collapse. And so it may feel really fast and then at times really slow. But I always think, again, because I think the universe is benevolent, it's giving us this first year of being like, because it's a 20-year cycle, Pluto and Aquarius.
Okay, 20 years.
Yeah, so we've got time, but it's also going to get really, really fast.
Makes sense.
And Pluto is triggering. He triggers our fears, our trauma. And so because it's in Aquarius, it's collective trauma. So all these collective stories of trauma are going to come up, right now, this year. And so it's like, how do I center? I also think that when we zoom out, I think that the beginning, it's funny to use that word because there was no beginning, but the pandemic years were a gift. They were an opportunity for us to go into the Taurus realm. That's where the eclipses were, which was our body, right? And our resources. So what made us feel nourished, supported, in our bodies? Because if we're going to start shifting timelines and realities, this is still a human experience. The spiritual experience is a human one. And so I always tell people, like, what did you learn? What were the practices that you did then that help you regulate? Because that was the homework that was preparing you for this time.
Fun.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
but I hear you for sure.
A lot of people awaken to their gifts, to new work, to practices like breath work and hypnosis, like these things.
That's when I made my career shift. I felt like it was more than a career shift. It was a shift of my operating center. I was operating from the personality, the ego, all of the milestones that I should hit I turned 40 during that time. Yeah. So all the milestones that I thought I should hit, and just threw them out the window and shifted back to this new center of operation, surrendered to that. Thought I was doing pretty good. And then now I feel like it's like shifting again. So again, I do think that what you're saying just lines up so much with what I'm feeling, what I'm seeing. And, using the map to even, like you said, historically go backwards, even in our own history, to say, okay, what did I learn at that time that I can take with me into this next cycle to comfort myself, to take the bigger perspective. So I find that really, really empowering.
I think there's an expression that says, if it's not a learning, or all learnings are love, or this, like, it needs to be a lesson. Like, if you don't learn the lesson, it's going to come back.
You'll have another opportunity.
And it might suck,
to learn it again.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I found that a lot. So I want to ask you specifically more about Pluto, because so you've described it. So it's going to be in Aquarius for the next 20 years, and it's just come in. And, you know, I've heard fear associated with Pluto before, so it sounds like that makes sense with the shadow. And people have talked about how World War II, the signature around World War II, Pluto was present then. It wasn't exactly the signature of the planets now, but around there was something big around Pluto in World War II.
So we have we have Saturn, which is the Lord of Karma, who like constricts. We have Uranus, who brings revolution and insights, and it's the kind of the Kundalini energy. And then we have Pluto, and we have Neptune. Those are the collective planets. And so right now we have a signature that is the same specific, like, because these planets shift, but they've not been together in the same place of the sky. The last time that they were together in the same is not actually World War II. It's actually the Civil War in the U.S. And yes.
That tracks.
Yeah. So, and, you know, people get triggered by that as well. So, but it's also useful to be like, okay, we're kind of here again. This might be, you know, what does civil wars look like in this age? It will not look the same. But also, what do we do with that information? Because it's data, right? So when we have that data, how do we, now that we have hindsight, because we knew what it was like then, we get to learn, we have history books, like what do we do with it now? And I think that's the empowering part, is that instead of leaning into fear, which would be totally normal, one, we need to address our fear, because the only way for us to transmute fear, and by the way, Pluto is power. So he takes fear, he takes trauma, he takes our desire for power and control, and he shows up in spaces like power dynamics, intimacy, sexuality, money. Like this is his realm. It's the underworld of the things where there's energetic exchange where we don't speak of it. So also death. He takes that and transmutes it into gold. Because dark matter, the alchemy happens with dark. It doesn't happen with like white matter. Gold is created through the alchemy of dark matter. So it is our kind of invitation, homework, to look at our personal dark matter, also collective, and be like, how do we transmute that, moving from fear or our desire for control, which is another way to handle fear, into gold? What would gold look like for me? And gold in the age of Aquarius looks like freedom. And freedom looks different for you than it looks for me. And so those are the questions that we ask ourselves. And how do we create freedom for ourselves? Because we're trying to create, right, with this energy. And so, yes, Pluto invites fear, but I think, you know, I had a lot of fear. My ancestors, there were a lot of good reasons for fear to exist in our lives. You know, my father was a political activist who was threatened. His life was threatened, many, many times. His friends got killed. Wow. Our family was refugees. Like it is also present in the chart, but it's also present in our DNA. So this was kind of a thing. And so I have an intimate relationship with it, and I know that it will always kind of be present. But I now realize that, you know, the dark that I was afraid as a little kid was an expression of my need to feel safe, to know where the light was. You know what I mean? Like these things.
Your freedom is on the other side of facing that.
You need to. And so it's also verbalizing, speaking what it is that we need. That inner child needed the light in the hallway, you know. So what does our inner child, because it's also about inner child work, what does our inner child need to feel in that state of hope and freedom? Because the future, again, like, to speak of Martin Luther King, he had a very strong Aquarius energy. And so I always, when people are trying to understand what Aquarius energy is, I speak of him because he spoke of the dream, and it was a dream of another world, and the dream included other people, brothers and sisters, you know, or the hippie movement was based on this as well. But it was a civil rights movement, right? So it wasn't this like passive, like, let's just go sit in our kibbutz. It was like, let us build something together. Through, you know, peaceful resistance. And so I think that's also part of it. We need to kind of like think of those, like, how do we embody those kinds of leaders in our own lives? It doesn't have to be about changing the world.
No, that's really interesting. So many things. So to pull it apart. the first thing, I'll go in order. The first thing that you said that really stuck out at me was that Pluto transforms dark matter into gold. So there's something quite alchemical, Jungian. He was an alchemist.
Yes.
But also, so when we talk about the Wheel of Time, I like the Kali Yuga, the picture of the Kali Yuga, but there's like the really long view. And I guess they're both correct, but then there is a shorter view. And it means that basically right now we're moving back up into out of the Kali Yuga. And some say even like March 25th, we moved out of it.
Yes.
So the way I see this circle and this paradigm that we're moving in is at the bottom at 6. That's like the dark period of just matter, of intellect, logic, the mind, like we've gone as far as we can, and AI is this external version of that. And now we have to go back up the clock. And where did the clock start? Spirit, energy, right? So we're kind of moving into this new clairvoyance, which is very Aquarian, like information without the processes that we had to use while we're in the muck and matter. So I love that you also equated gold to freedom, which is amazing, but it's also less structured and a little more disorienting than this, like the age that we were in before, which was it Capricorn?
So Pluto was in Capricorn, which is really like, I have a long-term plan, I have a career, it's all of these things. And so, but again, it's not like we get rid of it. We take from it what makes sense. Cause time is useful, but we're not like, constrained by it anymore. We are not defined by it anymore, because we get to reimagine a system that is more, I was going to say simple and complex at the same time. Like it's more interconnected. Right. It's not so hierarchical. It's not so linear. It is more multi-dimensional,
which makes sense as you're kind of moving, like, now where there's even more awareness of other dimensions. That's part of this paradigm. But I like what you said, that we don't leave it behind because we transcend and include, right? We take it with us. So it's like, it's there, but it's like not all that's there.
Yeah.
So I love that this is where we're going. But I think that it does, especially in this Hermit year and in the shift of it, it does lead to a lot of like, well, there's, like, where do things land?
Yeah.
So what do you say to people who are, feeling that disorientation right now?
Well, I think this is what I'm noticing in the collective the most is, and in the charts I read, I'm like, oh, wow. Like, everyone's going through a lot.
Try not to make the face.
Yeah. But it's, people are transforming. Like our world, if we are the micro of the macro, we are transforming. This earth is transforming. It is regenerative. If we help it, it does its thing. And so do we. But we have to ask ourselves, like, who am I? And, why am I here? Like, what do I want to do with this precious time of mine? And so I think that requires us to, again, go back to the Hermit, to sit with ourselves and let go of any definitions of identity that are connected to the ego, and go back to this like purest essence. And for a lot of people, they don't know what that is because they felt very uncomfortable to be alone, or they've identified with all the things outside of themselves, and so that's hard because that is a form of ego death. And I think a lot of people are going through that. And so it brings up the family stuff, the relationship stuff. It brings it all up. Our identification with wealth, money as a measure of value of who we are and what our lives have, because that was what was kind of measured, right? And so when all of that's kind of falling apart, it's like, well, then how do I relate first to myself? And so I think there's no way around it. I mean, we're both, the same age. We all go through a moment of an ego death, some, earlier than later. And when we're in it, it feels painful. But it's also like, I just remember being on the other side and be like, wow, liberation is actually the feeling, like how I would describe it. I felt liberated. I was like, wow, I can just be me. I don't care what anyone thinks, or I'm just trusting me and I'm going with it. But it takes like practice. It's like, again, being in the dark to find our unique gold and doing that work of the Hermit.
It is really an alchemical process. And I do think like, I hate the word middle age, but this age is such an opportunity in spiritual initiation. And it's an alchemical process that we just kind of like throw out to like midlife crisis. But Jung, actually, Steiner, Gurdjieff, a few others kind of talk about like your 40s as like this incredible opportunity again to shift that center of operation from, the self, the ego, the milestones, whatever they were, and to surrender, but in a much more empowered way. And I also think that, if we look at our own evolution that way, but we can also see the way that the collective is evolving out of that, the old paradigm that we're moving out of, or transcending and including, is actually really characterized by scientific materialism, industry, empire. So all of the ways of being and engaging with the world that we were taught, that our grandparents were, this is like, according to the Kali Yuga that I'm referring to, the yugas that I'm referring to, it's like a 2,000-year cycle.
Yes.
So it's like 2,000 years of like, this is reality.
Yes.
And then shifting.
And we're shifting it.
Yeah.
That's why it's so deep. Like, we've been in earth, like everything was in earth, and now we're moving into air. Like just on a like physiological level, our bodies are having to calibrate. Like just if you think of earth, right? Like take a rock and then take a feather. We're having to shift energetically, consciously from one state of being that is very different to another. And I think like that's also why our bodies are speaking, needing more rest, or like doing weird things. I say, notice what happens between your heart and your crown, because this is how the up-leveling happens. So any symptoms, the neck, the neck, the ears, the head, like this is, a lot of people are experiencing that this year. And this is why. And then when that happens, you can be like, okay, what is my body saying? Where am I maybe not aligning, or where do I need to express something so that I can be kind of more aligned and in my truth? And so it's really, not easy. But I what I love is that the age of Aquarius reminds us that we're doing it together. We are no longer doing it alone. We are kind of in our own little pot, right? Like, but we're doing it together. This is actually all of us doing it together. And that gives me, like I have, I found my community, I found my people. I think a lot of people are finding their people. And if they don't, that's another like homework to do, like go find your people, because, in any revolution, we have a need to sense of belonging, and also that people have our back. And so it's not just the universe, it's actually also the human people.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that we're doing this together and to find our people, because in 2021, I guess it was 2021, I was stuck in Australia during the pandemic. So like I emerged in 2022. So my intention was find the others. And so I was very excited by this awakening that happened. Very excited by, I have a lot of air in my chart. I'm a Libra, and I have a lot of planets in Libra, or a lot of houses. I don't know. There's a lot.
A lot in Libra, yeah.
So I like the idea of it is very exciting. So I kind of emerged in 2022, like stronger, ready, and looking for that community. And it's been interesting because the communities that I found are much different than the communities I was seeking before. And it's been really, really helpful. And it's allowed me to kind of surrender into the less exciting parts of the shift. So that's what I mean this year. It was like, I went into a little bit more hermit, but also knowing that when I emerge, there's communities that understand what's happening, that I can talk to, that see things from a planetary spiritual evolution or even spiritual revolution point of view, which is very, very necessary to me personally right now, and I think to a lot of people. So that's great advice to find your people.
I will say, you were speaking about the 40s, so as we were both Jungian, Jung said that everything before 40 is research. Yes. And I love that quote, because I would confirm that is true. I also think, though, that the ones that are going through their Saturn return right now, so 27 to 30, and the children that are being born are also, like, their level of awareness and consciousness is way higher. It's just, like, pretty interesting to witness. And in their charts, I see that they are really also, the Aquarian kind of like, flavor, culture is is normal for them. There's this fluidity with identity, with genders, like all of that is part of that kind of generation. And also, I think, a way for us to learn from them. And so it's important. And women being actually also in Chinese astrology, this is the age of women. And my teacher, Demetra George, who, to go back to your idea of the 2,000-year cycle, she studied all of the ancient civilizations, and she was mapping the moon, like when were we worshipping the moon, to like patriarchal kind of movements and matriarchal civilizations. And so for her, she's like, much like the moon, sometimes the moon disappears and these cycles last thousands of years, which is like, but then it starts to rise again. And so for her, we have been in the rising. We've been in the rising of the feminine as an energetic thing, which is the intuitive thing, the emotional thing, the community thing, but also of the feminine as the kind of embodied, gendered thing as well. So this is a year in Chinese Feng Shui for women to take up leadership, and specifically older women. So it's like really interesting because it's like really young people, and then also older women are really being called to like step up, really own their wisdom, share it, speak, which they don't really feel comfortable necessarily with, but it's part of our collective like empowerment. Like if we do that, if we take the homework and like listen, then we show up more, we actually help the collective.
Wow, that's really interesting because, the previous paradigm or the one that we're kind of still in, or the one that's crumbling now is, did not value elders and did not value the matriarchal grandmother wisdom, which I just feel that everyone could use a dose of, right? So it's so wonderful that that's what we're moving into, because it's just very obvious that that's what's needed from a leadership point of view, from a perspectival shift, just from just a release into the ground, or to, the embrace of the grandmother. In culture in the Western world, we don't really see aging as, we actually, we try to reverse it, and we don't value it in any way. So I love that there's a different way of looking at that.
Because time brings the lessons, right? This is Saturn is about learning over time. And so we learn over time. But then again, like if it's just learning for learning's sake, but I think the astrology now is saying like, you've learned a lot of things. What is it that you're going to share? And how do you then serve the collective story with your wisdom? Right.
So it's like you're kind of, experimenting, living the karma, and then shifting it into like dharma.
Yeah,
where do you use it? People are being called, or we are all being called, because, even with the work I do, right? It starts as personal development. For me, it certainly did. I want to do this better. Or I want to be better. So it was like really additive. And you're like, all right, I actually need to start subtracting now and finding out who I am. But then when you ask who you are and do processes like hypnotherapy or subconscious work or Jungian psychology, you can ask the question, who am I? But the answer you get is who we are.
Yes.
And you don't even know that you're going to find that answer, then you start finding that answer. So I really believe that awakening isn't awakening to yourself, it's awakening to what we are.
Yeah, to everything.
Yeah, and I feel that is very, very Aquarian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so the planet that is associated to Aquarius is Uranus. Uranus is the flash of insight, Zeus, lightning bolt of, but it's also that Kundalini energy. And it's also associated to the Tower card, which people always freak out when they see, because it's a tower that's crumbling and people are falling out the tower and there's this lightning that strikes it. And so it's about, crown chakra moment, but also the awakening. And so that word also, like, what are we awakening to that is personal, that crumbles, structures, so that we are building from something that is, higher self. And that also then awakens us to, I think that, we're all like one.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like impose that idea on or belief on others, but it's like, the more you practice anything, the more this is what we realize,
Yeah.
I see it in the charts and I'm just like, it's mind blowing to see how, or even like, the synchronicity, that's also another language of the new paradigm.
Yeah.
Like when you're in alignment, synchronicities happen. And so I hired a personal assistant this week because my work is growing and I really was feeling very overwhelmed. And so I was like, okay, I need to invest in myself. It felt like a huge leap for me. But when I sat down, I realized, wow, her dream was to work for me and to create financial stability. my dream is to be building things that are meaningful, but, in a way that's easeful, because that's what I'm supposed to be doing if I honor my chart. And then it's just like, we're helping each other's dreams, like really, because we're consciously showing up, expressing what we want. She knows what I'm working on. And it's like, honestly, in that moment, I was like, wow, it feels like timelines are shifting. And it was someone who'd sat with me in a moon circle who in February, so 3-4 months ago, and she manifested what she spoke of in that moon circle. So not only was I witnessing her like synchronicity, but then it weaved into us, fast forward a couple months later, barely knowing each other, now knowing each other, creating something together. And I think that is also the beauty of the age of Aquarius, or the new shift, is that then you start seeing that, like, when you start to dream and your dream becomes a reality, you confirm that it's true for me, and then we start weaving something together, and we hadn't even noticed. Right?
Yes, I totally, I've felt that before, and I see that more and more. The more coherent, right, and aligned and in alignment, and like just sort of less chaotic I am in myself, the more I start bringing in the synchronicities, right? They just start coming, right? And that's actually, in my kind of experimentation, so to speak, that's sort of how I got into this work. Like, I felt when I was in my 20s, I read The Secret, and I was like, oh, I'm really good at I can do this manifesting thing. I did it. And I found evidence in my life back, historically, where I'd done it. So I was like, oh, I can really make a lot of things happen, and did, right? Like things that I wanted at the time, right? And then suddenly it stopped. And so that was, but depending on the perspective you take, I was really like blocked and out of coherence. And it took a while to get back into it. And I'm like, oh, back on. So it was so cool to learn that you can do that. But I also think in the age that we're moving into, it's happening faster because more people are more coherent in themselves.
Yes.
So
or more strongly, like that light is strong. I'm just curious, like, so what brought you back to that place of, because you said, so it stopped, and then it was kind of like a form of chaos, and then I got back into myself. Like, what brought you back to that place? Because I'm sure would be useful for people listening.
Yeah. So basically, I was like, okay, I'm using all of these manifestation tools. I'm visualizing. I'm doing it, and I'd be like, I want to do this, and then I would visualize it, and I was like, holy shit, I'm doing that. And it was, I was living in New York City, and then I moved to London. I opened up a business. It went really well. It was a bar fitness studio, and we were, got really big really fast. We're in the press. And then I was like, oh, I want to do something in Dubai. And I was like making things happen. But each time I wasn't really focused on, kind of some of my subconscious drivers. It was very like, I want this success. I was never looking at why I wanted it, right? So I got burnt out. Like, I got physically, mentally, emotionally, really, really burnt out. So I sort of crashed and burned. And what kept happening was, like, I create these things, but then I lose control of them. Like, it's almost too big that like, it's too big and it's overwhelming me. So I'll just give it to someone else. So there'll be things where, like, I just sold out of a business too soon, or left something because it overwhelmed me. So I basically sat down to say, what am I doing? So I started looking at my drivers, and I started seeing, okay, some of the reasons that I'm trying to create this external success is to make up for deficits I feel internally. So I went into like introspective work and got into like therapy. And then what I found, though, was I was like, shit, I can't motivate now because I don't have this external motivation. So that's when I said, okay, how do I learn to change the way that I'm motivating? And that's when I found hypnotherapy, because it started helping me like bring what was unconscious into the consciousness. It was also helping me change like, programs around limiting beliefs that just weren't, useful anymore. So that transformed it really fast. So then I was able to motivate, because I had like a few years where it's like, I'm not touching anything because I don't want it to turn into anything. And it often turned into something good, but then it was like this monster that I couldn't control. So I found hypnotherapy that allowed me to direct my energy in a way that was aligned, really, understand why I was doing the things I was doing, and discerning whether I should do them or not, or whether it would be beneficial. So I used that tool to really work with the parts of me that were very unconscious at the time that I've made more conscious.
Thank you. I was curious.
And then I found that it was so powerful for me that I still had the desire to build something. So that's when I shifted my work completely. after the pandemic. I was like, there's nothing, I don't want to do anything that I don't want to do. I was doing consulting for other businesses, like wellness-based businesses, studios, hotels and stuff at the time. And I was like, this part of my life is over. I really want to dive into like the inner world. So the pandemic was a huge part of just letting all of that other stuff go. What will people think? I used to work in finance, and then I was in startups, and it was like, what will people think? I'm just going to do hypnotherapy now. And I was like, I don't care.
Beautiful.
But I think that, that shift that we're talking about, that alchemical shift that we have, is what we're all experiencing, but not often having the chance to name. So work like yours to really give resources and tools to people is massive, right? Knowing that when you're in a phase of something.
Yeah, it's a chapter of the story. It's the chapter of a story, like the hero story, right? Like
exactly.
And we have seasons, and there are different seasons, and some of those seasons are more private, others are more public. But we can, it's an unfolding story.
And knowing that things aren't permanent, and also being able to be like, okay, that's what's Saturn's right there.
Yes.
So speaking of, I want to, because we talk a lot about, we've talked a lot about time, and I know Saturn
is the Lord of time.
The Lord of time.
Yes.
So can we talk a little bit about like what Saturn's doing now, like what it's up to, what it wants with us, that kind of thing?
So Saturn is in Aries. And so if you think of Saturn as the Lord of karma and time, he wants us to use this time, and he has a 2.5 year journey.
When did he start?
So it just, same thing. It was like this year, and so Pluto moved in January. Saturn was in, I think it's March. So this is, I always forget the dates. Yeah. So I think it corresponds with that. And so when this Lord of karma shifted into Aries, what that means is, if you see that the circle starts with Aries and ends with Pisces, and it's a collective story, he has just begun a new whole circle, a whole journey of our collective and also personal evolution. So our relationship to time is now, it's like a beginning of a new way of relating to time. And so we are beginning the beginning.
Right.
We're beginning the beginning. And so what Saturn wants, we have to think about, okay, so if Saturn wants me to learn something, take responsibility, grow up with something, then we look at Aries. What does Aries mean? Unique to your chart, where is your Aries will be specific to you. But in general, Aries is about the beginning, springtime, going after what you want. It's the emperor energy. Emperors do not fight for the kingdoms. They don't really do much. They just are in their beingness. And in their beingness, they invoke respect. They invoke power. They invoke authority. They are also the protector of the land. So it's like kind of this father figure energy. It is also ruled by Mars, so it's about, desire. If you think about any Aries person, but also like springtime, spring doesn't like half spring. Spring goes after what it wants, which is to bloom. And it will think later about what, if that was a good idea to bloom like now or, yes. So it's very instinctive. Aries is also the first house, so it's about I am. And so it's that question, like, who am I? And what does that look like? And with no filter, because Aries is also unfiltered, just being born and arriving here. Then we have the journey later of like, what does that feel like? What do I want to create with that? But it's just the becoming, the beingness. And so each one of us has to, over the course of these next 2 years, think about how can they be their authority? How can they be the leader of their time, of their life? What does it feel like to embody the masculine energy? So while we have this creative feminine energy collectively kind of rising, we're also actually invoking now this sense of fire, inner fire, which is that light too, right?
Yeah.
That's when I get excited about something I go that way, right? And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for cultivating a relationship to that inner fire, that inner authority, confidence, like, again, to think of the emperor, Julius Caesar was small and ugly. Like, he didn't really, it's like, that stuff doesn't matter. Powerful. Like really just like in self-confidence and in affirming what we want. And it's not what we need, it's what we want, which is an interesting difference. because although we need to learn to discern between the two, we're being allowed to like go after what we want.
Because of the Aries.
Because of the Aries.
Because the Saturn's more about what you need, right?
Yes. Well, Saturn creates structure. So he wants us to structure our wants. And the way for us to structure our wants, is to Hermit, to focus on aligned action. That is like using that time. So it is a time of like not a lot of superfluous things. You know, the Emperor doesn't waste his time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it actually, I think that's very good to know that at the beginning of this new Aquarian age, which is, you know, much less restrictive, to create your container so that the feminine and the more free energy can go into the container that you choose versus the, you know, like flailing in the wind and ending up in other containers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to use this.
Yeah. I mean,
Saturn, I find always a little like...
Yeah, people are, but I mean, I don't know. I think, you know, I'm grateful for what Saturn has brought in my life. I loved my my Saturn return. I mean, loved it. Wait, that's a little excessive, actually. Let me take that back. I did not love my Saturn return, but, you know, becoming is such a beautiful thing.
I look back on those years as like some of the best times.
Yeah, like they were painful, but also...
But huge.
You know, huge.
Yeah, I do,
you know,
I do too.
I left a job that was amazing for no reason because I was just like, I really feel like something like bitter and bigger. And, you know, I fell in love, moved in, like, you know, it was like these big things.
Yeah.
Really big things. And I think that's also kind of in a sense also what Saturn brings is like, you know, when we're thinking about the dream, like I keep telling people, like, can you dream a bit bigger? Because Aries doesn't tone the wants down. Like it wants the cake and the icing, right? It's like children. Also, if you think of like energetically, that's the toddler energy. So it is a little bit immature. So we have to like know that we can be a little bit like instinctive and immature. But if we are, we can also like listen to that part of ourselves and be like, you know, children never say that they want something. They say that they need it. So we are supposed to treat our wants like needs.
Right. Okay. That's just so helpful such helpful information about how to approach right now. You know, dreaming big, you know, using the Saturn in Aries to create your container of all your big desires and dreams, which, you know, will allow them to come in for the next cycle. What happens next?
After Saturn moves?
Yeah.
So Saturn will move into Taurus.
Okay.
And Taurus is about resources and materials. So we are likely going to be shifting, like over this year, like really cultivating the authority, becoming more confident, and then shifting the way that we create value. And so I think this is when we're going to see like really shift around money, for example, will be, you know, later in a year and a half.
Interesting.
But right now we get to prepare because this is, you know, we get to learn. Saturn wants us to learn. We get to learn about how can we be more confident, including on those themes. But wherever, you know, your Aries house is will indicate where the kind of lessons are more specifically for you. It's interesting. Like there's a beautiful astrologer who moved here and she's a Virgo. And so Virgos are really like, they want everything to be perfect and the plan, very intellectual. And so she said to me, oh my goodness, you've got Saturn moving in the 12th house. This is like the big undoing. And because she'd experienced the same thing when Saturn was in Virgo. And I said, no. I was like, it's a great becoming. And she's like, huh? I was like, I'm an Aries. Aries isn't afraid of the fire, right? Like it's like, go, I'm running with it, right? But for the Virgo, it's like, oh, you know, it's hard to, because the plan is like, you know, run, and they're like, but run where, you know? Like,
run it shows
how?
up differently
You know,
depending on how you're...
Yeah, how do I run where do I run? Whereas the Aries is like, okay, let's go wherever it is that we're supposed to be going, right? So, and that's also the choice is like, I think when we embody our chart, we're kind of giving ourselves permission, her to be, you know, like to plan more, to give herself space to intellectualize things, for me to be more in that instinctive energy. Also, if Saturn is in Aries, that means that people who are Aries by sun, by moon, or I would say rather sun and rising, they're being invited to move into leadership roles over those, you know, 2 years. Okay. Because Saturn wants us to, you know, take responsibility, right? In the bigger story, take responsibility for my wisdom so that it serves the collective unfolding.
Very interesting. And I think that, the Saturn in Aries is very helpful for this time. And so much of what we're talking about is time related, right? We're talking about cycles.
Yes.
And we're also seeing this speeding up of time with AI and just, the speeding of the cycle. And astrology is just such a great tool for understanding and kind of just stepping out of time, because what I learned through my work is that so many of the tools that I use are time-related tools. Like we are regressing, or we are going back to the inner child, or we are working with the subconscious that doesn't have any concept of time. So, when I find that I'm struggling with something, it's usually related, it's time-related.
Oh, interesting.
Vaguely. It'll be something like, I wish I hadn't done that, or what's going to happen in the future, right? And, so many of the ways that we, like, if we're depressed, it's often like, regret about the past, right? Or if we're anxious, it's about like fear of what's going to happen, fear of the future. So these tools allow us to zoom out and just kind of step out of time, which is freeing in a way, having the map and then having the tools to help yourself through the phases of your map.
You know what's happening also, which is interesting in terms of time, and that gets maybe a bit more complex, so I wasn't going to share, but so we've got Saturn, Lord of Time, in Aries, so we're beginning. And at the same time, we have a polar opposite thing happening, which is also intrinsic to this like paradigm shift, right? Because we're holding everything. And so what's happening is the eclipses, which is a point of collective evolution. So these are really evolutionary karmic moments, is in Pisces, which is the end. So we have a collective kind of like letting go, surrendering, removing all sense of time, whilst we're also, time is being like implanted or, anchored in this beginning simultaneously. Right. So this is also why some people may feel a little bit disconcerted, because energetically they're feeling those two things. And what's happening when we are in the eclipses in Pisces, grief comes up. So where we had Pluto.
When are these?
So we've been in it we started this year in the spring. We have another year and a half.
Felt that with my moon in Pisces.
Yeah, so it's like, it's about the letting go, but the letting go of like how things were also we need to create space for the grief, right? Even if we're excited about the future, even excited where we are, even we're excited about being leaders of this new world, we still grieve the things that we are letting go of, the versions of ourselves that will no longer be, which is part of change, right? So I think it reinforces this sensation of change. And anyone who's gone through big change knows that they've probably, hopefully, had to, give space to grief. And I think we don't ritualize that as well. Like, I think this is why I love moon time. I love to sit with the moon, because when I sit with the moon every month, or with my bleed, I still bleed, like, these are moments when we can be like, okay, what am I shedding? What am I letting go of? What happened this month? So that we're in that relationship to infinite time and also present time.
Yeah, infinite and present.
Yeah.
My one of my teachers, John Churchill, I'm in a program of his and his wife's called Planetary Dharma. So it's all about the fourth turning.
Yes.
And basically like the planetary Dharma, like becoming leaders of
the new world.
Yeah, exactly. And he talks about how this year is this opportunity to reverse time. I'm still trying to figure out what that means. I mean, he explains it a lot. I get it, but I don't have a way of explaining it yet. So I try not to talk about too many things that I don't fully understand, but it feels very important. Yes. And it feels very important to astrology. He talks a lot about astrology. He talks a lot about astrology. A lot of the tools that are very Jungian, very alchemical, are very, very present right now in this teaching. But I also think just the understanding of like the cycle and the moment that we're in is just so key right now.
I think a lot of people are, and that's the intuitive part, are sensing like soul retrieval and soul remembering. And so that for me, it's not that we're going backwards. So I would love to know how he describes it, but we are retrieving information from the past that will serve us to really come into that confident person that we need to be to move forward.
I love that way of looking at it.
And so I do think that time is collapsing. Like I have had so many experiences this year that have like and I'm seeing that the people who are coming into my field are people that need to be reassured about, one, their inklings, their intuitions, but also that we don't need to go back in time. It's just that we get to use that. And even I'm talking like past life energy, right?
Yeah.
It's coming back in the field because the way I explain karma and time is that if you close your eyes and you think about a memory when you were a child, you're in that place. Like you are in that place. So to conceive that it is something that is separate to this moment is almost naive, right? It's like, but the same is true the other way, right? When we vision or we dream is another realm. Actually, that's a separate thing. But like if we're visioning the future, we can be in that place as well.
Exactly.
Right. And so what's going to happen is, I think, because the pace, as you were saying, goes faster, these things happen more quickly. If we don't have the tools, if we don't have the right teachers, then it can feel a little bit like, how do I anchor? And so that's why I just think it's so beautiful, because we get the Hermit year that reminds us again, you know, I need to go in my room a little bit and just like rest, or I need to like think about it, I need to process it. What is it that I need so that I can anchor more deeply?
Yeah, that's an amazing kind of gift of information to give to people, because I think it's very, as I said at the beginning, it's very comforting right now. Before we end, I want to ask two more questions. So what do you say to people who think that astrology is fluff or woo-woo? Because there's so much science, there's so much math even. It's so obviously accurate. Yeah, what would you say?
So I get this comment a lot, and I always say you don't need to believe in it. You don't. But it is one of the most ancient tools. The ancient scientists, the ancient leaders, you know, our marking of time, in fact, moon time, the first measure that we have is this Mesopotamian bone where they were marking, you know, the moon. So we've done this forever, and we've looked at the stars to, you know, decide when to do certain things and what to do things. In our modern world, you know, billionaires and leaders and big entrepreneurs always use astrology as a tool because they know that it is very efficient. So, you know, like, but I think it's more about, I say, like, if you actually tune in and you're given the map, you see that it is a confirmation of what you probably know inside. So the tools of intuition, of going inwards, are the same. It's really as above, so within, right? And so it's also within you. It's just, for me, I love it because it creates such ease. I don't have to second guess. I can actually plan. That's my Virgo moon. Like, I like to plan my things. I don't like to hustle. I've got my Taurus, like, I want to enjoy life. So for me, it's just been a beautiful tool of the path of least resistance and the path of greatest pleasure, you know, and most easeful alignment. So that's why I think it's, you know, useful. And it then also gives me the sense of trust, because when I do that, I see that life is actually designed to be easy.
Yeah.
And most of what I've seen in the chart, I now realize I knew, but I never gave myself permission, because it is about my cultivating my unique and very weird way of being. And the weirdness actually is part of this Aquarius age. Like, owning our weirdness is part of how we become most authentically ourselves. But that's been probably the most scariest thing, because if I think about my teenage self, I had my friends and we were weird together. But as soon as I left that friend group, you know, and became 18, the world was not made for me. And the world isn't really made for me. But the world that I am moving through is made for me, because it's called me to become who I am and to speak about these things, so that I hope that I can awaken people to this inner knowing that they have, right? To really embrace their vulnerability, their sensitivity, their gift, their dreams, everything that they know.
And I'm so glad you are, because I think that if we learned as children about astrology, that we'd be moving through these seasons collectively and individually, life would be easier. So I'm so glad that you are sharing this.
Thank you.
And my last question is, in these moments where, you know, maybe someone isn't in their, you know, acquainted with their chart, or even if they are and still feeling the, you know, the growing pains, how do you still find joy in, you know, the turbulent times?
Such a beautiful question, because joy, you know, in joy, Joy is, and for me, it's in my chart. I have my North Node, so my soul path is in Leo, which is all about joy. So that is a question that feels very personal, but it's also how do we cultivate joy? Well, I think there's two things. One is I always say go check your moon, because your moon is your intuitive self, and it will make sure that you have your needs met. And in this world of wanting to be and do, the moon is always bringing us back to this kind of inner world. And that's an easy one. And so you see where my moon is, what's my element. If it's air, fire, earth, or water, it needs different things. If it's earth, you want to spend time in nature. You want to make sure that you're taking care of the body. If it's air, you want to be learning about things, talking to people, moving. If it's water, you probably want some more emotional things, intuitive things. And if it's fire, then like creating, maybe, getting in that kind of zone of creativity. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think, acknowledging it. Jung said that we are our purest self before the age of 6, unless there was a, huge trauma. It's one of my homeworks that I give my mentees is to go back to their youngest self that they identify with, and to have that photo where they can see, and to define themselves with like 3 words, like what was I like? What did I enjoy? And to do those things. Because if we talk about time being, my youngest self, all of those versions, including the one that made mistakes, all of those versions need to be called into this time so that I can become the person that I'm supposed to be. And joy, I think, sits with the inner child. But for some, it's like the inner teenager as well. So, depending on my season, sometimes it's my...
Sure.
But I think the inner child is the key.
Beautiful. No, thank you so much for that answer. I have one question about the first part of it. When you said your sign, like whether it's air, fire, earth, or water, is that the sign with your moon, or just in general?
So, it works for everything.
All of them.
Yeah. But if I'm thinking about like how do you cultivate joy, it's how do you cultivate, making sure that you're cultivating that connection to what you need. But it is true that the sun is our ego self, is our solar self, is more inclined to be joyful as well, right? But I think it depends on your sun sign. Because if you're a Virgo, for example, or Libra, you might be too preoccupied with what like how to make sure that everyone else is happy before you are.
Yeah,
right.
It's been a huge learning.
So.
And it's interesting. One of my teachers says to me, whenever I'm like, okay, what was the lesson in this? This is the lesson. This is what it is. She's like, nope, but that wasn't the lesson. I'm like, well, what was the lesson? And she was like, how to hold more joy.
Wow.
She said the biggest problem she sees in clients is that what people don't know how to do is hold more joy. So that's why I wanted to ask you, how do we do that in this time? Because that is... in her, from her perspective, the answer. And I just find it's harder to do when we're disoriented.
And when the world is, literally physically burning. Yeah. And we don't give ourselves permission to enjoy the transformation, the change, the grief, because, and I will leave it at that, but like when my father passed and became a mother, it was also the most joyful time because I realized there was more to life.
Right.
But, it coexists. Like we can be grieving ourselves and at the same time have enjoying this moment, little parts of it.
We're allowed to have joy. So thank you. I'll leave it there because I think that's a beautiful ending. So I really enjoyed this conversation, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I could keep asking you questions all day, so I'm going to stop.
Thank you.